Hello everyone, good afternoon, good morning, and even good evening to some of you. My name is Amy Edelstein, and I want to extend a very warm welcome to you to today's teleseminar, Creating an Ecosystem for Emergence. I'm really excited to share with you some of the things that I've been thinking about and reading about and exploring. We're going to be taking a close look at what a spiritual ecosystem is. And by a spiritual ecosystem, I really mean the ecosystem of our relatedness. The relatedness that we're aware of, and a deeper sense of relatedness that I want to open up on this call together. It'll give us another way to really look at the context of our lives, to look at how we create meaning, and to open up the ways that we develop meaning in relatedness with ourselves, with the community around us. And what you're going to see throughout the course of the next hour is that I'm going to expand our understanding of that community, of who or what makes up that community, how we are in relationship with it, and how it's in relationship with us. The reason why I've been thinking so much about what creates the ecosystem of our relatedness and how engaging with that ecosystem differently can catalyze emergence is I've really been looking freshly at the phases of spiritual growth and development. What does it really look like? What are the factors involved with it? And how can we think about this differently? I want to encourage you all to open your minds a little bit. And I don't mean to extend the metaphors and the ideas about relatedness that I'm going to share with you in, for lack of a better term, woo-woo or esoteric way. It is really a way of understanding and reflecting on how we move about in the world differently that I feel strongly about, that I feel we need to catalyze a different type of awakening in ourselves, an awakening to a profound sense of interconnectedness and interdependence. We're not just in relationship with things, but those things are in relationship with us. They're talking to us, talking at us, extending themselves to us. And usually we only see ourselves as human beings in the center of everything, extending and catalyzing and orchestrating and directing and mitigating the relationships that we have. I believe, and this isn't a new idea, there's certainly other philosophers, both contemporary and over the last 150 years, the more process philosophy has been explored, who have been positing this type of relationship. And a lot of what I'm going to share with you are ideas that have been stimulated by them and that I've been reflecting on. So this is not something brand new, but it's something that I think has not been seeded into the conversation about human transformation in the way that it could be. And I find it both very moving and enlivening and enriching as I populate my world more, and I hope that you will too. Because I've been thinking about what is my/our relationship to everything. So what is the relationship that I have with this wood table that I'm sitting next to, or the brick wall on the side of me? And what's its relationship with me? What's my relationship to the technology that I'm using, and to that technology's interaction extending towards me? It's easier to see with the natural world. What's my relationship with the waving bamboo outside the window, and what's it speaking to me? What's it saying? What is this orchid on my mantelpiece that's in full bloom, which I'm very proud of, since it's the third time it's bloomed since I brought it home to live here. I feel an affinity with it. I feel that it extends an affinity to me. What does that mean? And so all these things are part of what I want to share with you about what helps create optimal conditions for our spiritual renewal and discovery, what creates the ecosystem that best allows for emergence, for growth, and for new interactions, new relatedness, new capacities to reveal themselves. I'm going to try to make this as experiential as possible in an hour. These are concepts and ideas that I've been looking into also in preparation for a weekend immersion, a retreat that I'll be doing in 3 weeks, where we'll have the opportunity to go into this with much more engagement and interaction than we can on the phone. But I'm hoping that we'll really be able to do something that will give you a real experience of what I'm talking about and begin to shift the sense of self a little bit. To start with, why don't we take a look at what an ecosystem is and what it could be, and then we're going to look a little bit at what emergence is, and we'll put those two together and then look at the conditions and ways of looking at the health and balance of that ecosystem and see where we get to. To begin with, let's do a short guided meditation. If you can, seat yourself somewhere comfortable where you can set the phone down or just hold it in your lap. Allow yourself to settle into yourself. You can close your eyes gently or look at the floor in front of you and let the meditation begin to fill your consciousness, your experience. Now put your attention on the community of living organisms that are in your environment. You don't need to open your eyes, but you can if you'd like. But in your mind's eye, start to connect with the community of living organisms around you. Experience the biodiversity, the different elements. We may be in a room with others. Feel into that sense of relatedness. We may be outside in the sun with trees waving their branches over our heads, with flowers beginning to unfurl their blooms. Experience temperature and texture. What does green feel like? What's the scent of a blue sky? What's the color of the wind? Let your rational mind loosen up a little bit. Feel into the ways that the objects in our environment communicate to us. The windows, the walls, the floor under our feet. Experience not just your contact point with all these things, but their contact point with you. As you start to open up to a way of experiencing the relatedness between these things in our environment and us, what qualities does that bring up? Do you feel welcome? Do you feel a part of the ecosystem? Do you feel separate from it? Can you imagine experiencing more porousness, more connectivity, more oneness as you experience this multidimensional interplay of relatedness? Notice how putting your attention on these different sensory experiences of things around us, the taste of color, the sound of texture, we start to feel into a more alive interrelatedness. We can shift our environment this way, our experience of our environment, from one that's cold and distant to one that becomes more intimate, more familiar, simply by shifting the quality of our attention, our curiosity and respect. And now experience beneath all of the objects a sense of a current of being or space. Feel into that and experience the sounds, the stillness, the roar of silence. Let the membrane of yourself be porous. Allow it to breathe in and out with this experience of being. And now you can open your eyes, bring your attention back, and we can end the meditation. If you experienced an opening or porousness or the hint of a new type of relatedness with the environment around you. Press the 1 key so I have a sense. And if you didn't, which is also fine, press the 2 key so I have a sense of what everyone's experience is. So wonderful. We have a few percent who didn't experience a new type of relationship or the potentials of one, which will be interesting to explore later on. And about 55% who experienced either the hint of an opening, a porousness, or plasticity. Thanks so much. Now, whether you did or didn't is fine. What we're doing in this is we're really trying to both understand philosophically and also lean into experientially. But it takes time to unpack all of this. And it takes time to consider this in a way that is different than we usually think about our relationship with our environment, and a very human-centric, if not also me-centric, way of seeing our relatedness. I like the word ecosystem because it includes quite a lot. An ecosystem, gives you the sense of a community of organisms that are in relationship or a conjunction with components of the environment that they're in. We think of an ecosystem like a swamp or a marshland, and there's water and reeds and soil, and then within that ecosystem are insects and fish and birds and mammals. And we start to think about an ecosystem in these natural environments, but we can think about an ecosystem of the self, an ecosystem of the depth of ourselves, of consciousness. Consciousness paradoxically feels like one unified, undifferentiated sense of awareness or isness. And at the same time, as we lean into our meditative or contemplative practice, we start to feel that within that oneness, there's also a sense of qualities of an ecosystem of being. Now, how can there be an ecosystem within nothingness? It's a little hard to describe because we call it nothingness because it really lies beyond the mind. But what we're able to intuit is a sense of movement, of process, of currents, of balance or imbalance. So an ecosystem includes not just the tangible. If we can start to think about the ecosystem of our spiritual selves, we can start to tune in to more subtle aspects of our being. Interested in opening up is a way of relating to the world around us that is less human-centric than what we tend to think about. Now, of course, there's an undeniable hierarchy of complexity in organisms and in capacities of consciousness. Human beings have more complexity, both in our physical organisms, in our capacities for cognition, our movement and abilities to build and create and language than an amoeba does. There's no doubt about that. I don't mean to deny that there is a hierarchy of complexity. But generally, when we think about the complexity of human consciousness and our ability to self-reflect and to reflect on our own evolution, our thinking tends to narrow down and become rather two-dimensional. in a way that biases human relatedness to the exclusion of other types of relatedness. Again, I don't mean this to be some kind of magical thinking that is non-rational or non-scientific, but if you really start to interpret our relationship with our environment differently, you start to see that the way that we bias human consciousness is only one way to order our reality. And it's one way that may prove to be rather limited and may prove to be somewhat responsible for some of the lack of compassion and care towards our natural environment, towards our fellow human beings, towards the delicacy of our own spiritual growth and consciousness. In a lot of ways, we're crude instruments. Now, reconsidering the place of human beings, whether we're aware of it or not, is a deep thing, because fundamentally we are reconsidering the interrelationship with everything in a way that overturns or at least challenges a belief and a pecking order that was really inspired by and articulated by René Descartes when he talked about the great chain of being, which put humans in one position and the objects of the world in another. Now, we may not know about Descartes' great chain of being, we may not have read about it, but it is the order and guidelines and philosophical viewpoint with which our culture tends to relate to the world around us. So that's a powerful philosophical view, a powerful and useful philosophical view that we're questioning as we start to think about the ecosystem of relatedness, and an ecosystem that could facilitate and support new emergence and new types of relatedness, new types of empathy and compassion in a very profound way. Now, as we increase our willingness to consider that things and animals and plants and the environment and even technology has a relationship with us, just as we have a relationship with it, we start to open ourselves up to input from a variety of sources and sensory experiences that we wouldn't have expected to. And it requires us to start to consider the presence of so many other things in our environment that are part of the balance in the world around us. I experience this a little bit the more I really squint into this and allow it to take hold of my consciousness, which I personally find a little bit unnerving. And I have my rational mind going, no, this is magical thinking. This is not, your lamp is not actually in relationship with you. But in a way it is. Because I look at it, I experience its beauty or lack of beauty, its functionality, its brightness, in a way that it is doing something, extending those qualities to me, and those qualities it is extending is having an effect on me. And that effect, I would say, is a type of relatedness. It's not something I'm initiating, it's something that's being initiated towards me. Like I just said, it does create a little bit of discomfort in me to think about it like this. What's powerful about it is it really starts to shake a very private, isolated, and alienated relationship to the world around us. It starts to create a sense of being in motion, being in process, being in this dynamic conversation, if you will, with the things around us. And I start to feel a little bit like one of those Tibetan or Hindu deities, like Avalokiteshvara with 1,000 arms, with an eye in the palm of each hand. You know, that there's so much to be in relationship with, and that's in, you know, that I need to listen to, that I start to feel like I need to almost grow new organs in order to do that. And that is part of the experience, is we want to cultivate our capacities for emergence. We actually do want to grow new, not physical organs, but sensory organs, abilities to relate in a very multidimensional way. And as we do that, we see the world differently, we interact differently, we connect differently. And as we do that, all kinds of intuition, insight, connectivity, community, collective intelligence starts to emerge. And take a moment and just feel into your experience of your environment right now. Take a moment to see if you can start hearing more. A quality of listening, a quality of accepting the incoming communications and messages, not just extending the outgoing. One of the primary ways that we create the conditions for emergence is we start looking at familiars, at the fundamentals of life in a new way. It's very simple, but as you can see, it's very difficult to shift our quality of relationship and our quality of listening without coming up against our strong ideas about how things are done, what's right, what's sophisticated, what's mature, what's ungrounded, airy-fairy, a throwback to more primitive times and cultures and ways of being. We have a lot of buts, a lot of restrictions on the ways we want to inquire and investigate. So starting to look at the familiar and the fundamentals of life in a new way is part of what creates conditions for emergence. And why it creates conditions for emergence, because it starts to shift in a profound and deep way our sense of self. It starts to shift who we believe ourselves to be, what we believe self to be, and it opens us up to intimations of freedom and intimations of unbounded consciousness. And within that, we start to see new orders, new relationships, greater perspective. Sometimes it's very subtle and delicate. And sometimes it's very unsettling and powerful. And it can feel like beautiful, but like the earth has been removed from our feet, from under our feet. And when the earth gets removed from under our feet, we're either in free fall or we're just in fall. And that sense is something that we want to learn to become comfortable with. One of the things that I felt was important to look at as we're reconsidering our relationship with the world around us and reconsidering our relationship with each other is, how do we use language and communication? What do we think of as language and communication? And how can we view language in a new way that, again, opens us up to the possibility for a sense of relatedness with way more in our world and in our spiritual intuition than we allow ourselves to be in relationship with. Now, I always loved to write. I was an aspiring poet in my teens and One summer, I spent all summer as the recipient of a statewide scholarship for the arts, and I was writing poems all summer. It was my idea of teenage heaven. We were a few hundred arts students from across the state at a college campus. High school students at a college campus was a big deal, and we had fabulous teachers, and everyone was there in different art fields just creating for 5 weeks in the summer. And I spent the whole time just listening to language. It wasn't, I started to really feel into words, not just what they meant, but the onomatopoeic quality of them. How did they feel in my mouth? How did they come off my tongue? Did they rattle as I thought about them in my head? What was the feeling I wanted to evoke in the poems I was writing through the words that I chose, not just because of their literal meaning, but because of these other dimensions and other senses that they evoked? Some words feel light, some words feel dark or black, some words sound like a smell, some words feel, they express a temperature or a quality, they make you sweat or they make you cold. And I really started to feel into these different dimensions of language. And when I was doing that, I was also spending a lot of time outdoors on this beautiful campus and walking around and sitting under trees. And just, again, as I was feeling into language, I was feeling into my natural environment. Now, as some of you know, I've recently been reading a book by David Abrams, The Spell of the Sensuous, which was a book, it's not a new book, it was written in '96. And he speaks a lot about the way we use language. And he talks about words as active, sensuous presences afoot in the material landscape, which I love. I mean, he's a beautiful writer. And he talks about the quality of language being embedded in our world around us. When you start to think that way, I mean, I'm not talking about Dr. Dolittle being able to speak with the animals, or some Native American shamans who are able to communicate with animals. But I am talking about opening up to a way that our natural environment has sounds and languages that speak to us. So in the way that I, as a young poet, was feeling just the sound of the words and what they meant and what they communicated, when we are opening up to the ecosystem of relatedness with the world around us, those sounds start to express a language of their own. The birds, when they come out, I live on the East Coast, and I'm happy to say where I live at least, we're out of the winter, and the birds are so loud. They are just so happy. They are getting about, making little babies and little eggs and getting their nests going, and they are just thrilled to not be shivering and looking for the tiniest morsel to eat. And their song communicates a sense of vibrancy, a sense of happiness, a sense of partnership, a sense of relatedness, a sense of relief. Now, I don't talk to the animals, but as I hear these sounds, I can feel how they are in their way communicating and in relationship with the world around them through their song. It's a different way to view language. It's a different way to view communication. The more receptive we can be to nuances in our language, ways that our tone of voice, the speed of our words, the harshness or softness of the vowels communicate and relate and interconnect, and the way that we mimic the sounds of our natural world, the way the birds chirp, and you see little children communicating, trying to communicate before they have a vocabulary to their parents, they start to chirp. They just talk and talk to themselves, but they don't have words yet. But there's a whole language and story going on. And they feel in the way the same as the natural world communicating back to us. So this is part of the ecosystem that as we open up to, we start to experience, again, this porousness of our sense of self. I thought I was this person at this age. I thought this was what I understood, and that was what I did not understand. I thought that this was the limit of my circle of friends. This was the limit, a very small subset, a very small circle of people or things that I was in dialogue with. I thought I was alone. I thought I was separate. As we start to explore a porous membrane of self and start to explore what it is to be in relationship with the world around us, we start to experience that we're not as alone and separate and isolated and alienated and sad as we often feel ourselves to be. The world often feels harsh and distant, unfriendly, and frightening to us. Without shifting who we're in touch with by reflecting on the language of the natural world around us and the objects around us, and by reflecting on the relationship that things have with us, not just what we have with them, our world starts to feel more full and both more unfamiliar in a good way, because we start to feel respect for everything around us, and also familiar. This is a powerful contemplation to do, just as you're walking or standing, waiting for the bus or the subway, when you're having your morning coffee, looking out the window or at the room in front of you. Experiment with this, because it takes time to really feel into the possibility of shifting our sense of self. It really does take time to allow this type of communication to start to open up in a way that doesn't feel unnatural or weird, but in a way that feels congruent with everything we know about the complexity of human consciousness and the development of human relatedness, but that also allows us to become recipients of the extension of relatedness of other things. What we feel into with all of this is our interconnectedness. What Alfred North Whitehead called process, what Gregory Bateson talked about in terms of the relationship between, what the Buddhists talk about in terms of codependent origination. Nothing is isolated. John Muir, the great naturalist who was responsible in the late 1800s for beginning to protect America's natural wilderness, he said that every phenomena is hitched to everything else. We move as one. We move in connection with everything else. There's nothing that arose separately from everything else. So this idea of mutuality, this idea of interrelationship and interrelatedness, it's an old idea, certainly back to the Buddha's time, a good 2,600 years ago, and up until our present process philosophers and evolutionary theologians. one of the ways that we open up to this sense of interconnectedness is through these exercises and shifting our sense of the ecosystem of self, and who's initiating relationship, and is more initiating relationship with us than we might believe. Part of what can arise when you start opening up to the codependent origination, the interdependent relationship of all things, is a sense of overwhelm. There's a sense of, oh my goodness, am I just going to be hearing this deafening cacophony of noises and sounds, and I already have enough demands coming at me. You know, if my cell phone doesn't stop dinging and my email doesn't stop like clicking over one more and one more and one more, and if the advertising signs don't stop, soliciting me to respond, I'm going to go crazy. We often feel like that. And even when no one's talking to us, we feel like we can't give ourselves the luxury to be silent and still and to let go. Paradoxically, awakening to this codependent origination, this profound interdependence, allows us to hear not a mess and chaos of noise coming at us, demands for relatedness coming at us, but it allows us to let go, because we're not trying to hold everything out. We're not applying all that effort to keep ourselves together and to keep out so much that we don't want in our world. But it through that interrelatedness and allowing that relationship, that relatedness with more things, it allows us to relax in a very paradoxical way. And as our boundaries become more porous in this way, and we let go as one part of this vast and beautiful multiplicity, we can begin to feel into and intuit a melody or a sensitivity of intelligence, of a collective communication that comes through. We can create environments for collective communication through a process of transformative inquiry, a kind of structured dialogue that enables people to come together in extraordinary ways, and they are powerful ways of dialoguing and being, and I encourage everyone to engage as much as possible as you can in those. But that's just one form of collective intelligence. We can awaken to this type of collective communication and intelligence and intuiting these patterns and melodies and directionality within that as we open up to the language and the input of the environment around us. As we do this, we're part of what we are doing is allowing for new connections and new ways of ordering our environment to emerge. And we're allowing for a sensitivity to an ecosystem around us that we're a part of, and for the ebbs and flows within that ecosystem, which provides for fluid balance. We can start to sense where we're overgrowing, becoming manic in one area of our life, where we're allowing some desire or project to outlive its usefulness, or to consume our attention in a way that's unwholesome and separating from a more balanced interrelationship with things. As we become sensitive to this, we will start to see ways we can push beyond ourselves, beyond our limitation. And that pushing doesn't have to be a kind of harsh marathon sprint. We evolve in many different ways, and part of pushing ourselves is when we feel we can't let go and listen more deeply to allow ourselves to do just that, and to trust in that way, and to listen, and to soften our edges so that we can see, oh, this is in fact the way that I am growing right now. Not the way I thought I should, or the way somebody told me I had to, but the way my own spirit is unfurling. These types of exercises help us get in touch with that. We start to become aware to the more vibrant strands of experience around us. We start to become less absorbed with that which isn't that important or interesting. And we start to become aware of balance. That balance doesn't mean that everything is always in stasis. But balance means that we don't always, if you look at the human body, we go through growth spurts. So look at how much, little babies grow between 1 week and 3 months. Look at how teenagers shoot up, how their brains and sense of self changes from the time they're 15 to the time they're 22. We go through growth spurts. So growth spurt is not out of balance, but to push for that same type of eruption in growth when we've completed that growth spurt is out of balance. And this ability to be porous and sensitive to our environment starts to open us up to a sensitivity to how we grow and develop. I would love to take you through one more guided meditation, but I want to allow for anyone who has questions or wants to comment or is experiencing a shift in what's possible, hearing a shift in how you're listening differently, to press the 1 key, and I will be happy to take a couple of questions before I go into the meditation, because I'd love to do one more guided experience of how we can work with this. So press the 1 key if you have a question. If you don't have any questions, that is absolutely fine, and we will go straight into the meditation. I've got Margot on the line. Margot, I'm going to unmute your line, and then we'll go into the meditation. Hi, Margot.
Hi. I think this is amazing what we're doing together here, Amy, because, I had the experience of something more than human relatedness. It was really a kind of a shocking, profound kind of thing to come to. And what you're speaking about is opening up to relatedness to, when I first got hurt, it was like narcissism was my problem, and then I saw narcissism was humanity's problem. And I think that's what you're addressing. I'm very grateful for this exploration, and I feel like I walk out of my home now and be in a place where I'm much more expanded in my consciousness. I'm listening to things that I never would have imagined. I think this is for me, it's a very profound opening, and I'm very grateful for it. So thank you so very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much, Margot. Okay. So I want to do a short meditation. And the context of this meditation is unity. And we want to let go as you sit still and allow yourself to sink into yourself. Allow your experience of self-definition to be a little more porous, a little more plastic. In this meditation, we'll be doing a short retreat, a few minutes of letting go into stillness. Allow yourself to soften your ideas about what truth looks like, what freedom looks like, what relatedness looks like. Give yourself the permission to hold close to your heart that which is most meaningful in your life. Bring the experience of relatedness, of process, to the forefront. Experience the awareness of our interconnectedness with all that's come before us, all that's present now, and all that will come after us. Allow the sense of interconnectedness to create a mesh or net or web in which you can rest and let go. Experience the compassion that brings, the empathy towards all other beings, and the love and the strength of self. And as you experience this, as we bring the meditation to a close, allow a sense of well-being to fill you. Draw that sense of well-being into your heart as a small and concentrated seed. And then extend that well-being, the fruits of that seed, from this time and all generations forward, to serve the benefit of all others. And with that, we can bring the meditation to a close. And I want to thank you all so much for listening and participating. And wanted to mention to you that if you are able to come on retreat, to take 2.5 days to be together, to explore this more together, and to have time to experience it, have time to really renew the deeper levels of self, have time to reflect, have time to spend in contemplation. Please join me April 24th to 26th in the Philadelphia area, and after the call I'll send you more information about it. But I'd welcome you all on retreat if you can make it, and otherwise please do continue to explore these things, continue to explore ways to foster a new type of relatedness with the world around us. It's certainly so important for all of us and for our planet.